Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started, and what we're going to work on today is finishing up the payload bay. We glued on the bottom of the bay. We have the body tube glued to the nose cone, and now what we're going to do is we're going to put a series of 3 machine screws in here. And so to do that, we're going to need the drill. We're going to get a drill, and we need 2 bits. We need the 3/32 and the 5/32 drill bit. If you haven't used a drill, you might find somebody that's used it. They're pretty dangerous. That this drill bit will go right through this table. Don't do this at school. And so you can imagine that if I hit myself or I hit somebody else, how fast it's going to go through their skin and their bone. So it's not a toy. It's a sharp, dangerous tool. And eventually we're going to put the other bit in and use that. So we have those 2 items, and another item that I didn't put out. We're going to need a flat blade screwdriver and a Phillips screwdriver, and mine is right here. I have a screwdriver called a 6-in-1. That's a flat blade Phillips. I can turn it around, and I have bigger ones, and it's called a 6-in-1. All you need is a little screwdriver that's flat blade and one that's Phillips. We still need all of our other things, our JB weld, tape, stir sticks, some extra paper towels, and we're going to grab part bag number 5. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be putting this together, and we're going to be drilling the holes in here. And then we're going to be using the screws and JB welding them into the coupler, the brown tube, so that they don't fall out and stuff. And what that does for us is it gives us the ability to put the screws in, tighten it up so that our payload is in there nice and secure. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of tape about 3 inches long, and I'm going to put this against my shirt. What I'm doing, putting it against my shirt, is I'm taking some of the sticky off that tape. If I was to put masking tape right on the white or the brown cardboard tube and to pull it off, it would lift a bunch of the cardboard with it. And when we go to paint this, it's going to make it really hard to get that to look like the other stuff. So when I'm putting tape on cardboard, all I'm going to do is take a piece of the tape, put it on my shirt, and pull it off. So we're just going to take this piece of tape and tape these 2 pieces together so that they don't move around from end to end or up and down. So the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pen and I'm going to draw a line right on this seam, about 1 inch long, and then I'm going to put a line down, and I'll put a line right here. So that is an alignment line. When I take this apart, all I have to do is turn it till those 2 lines match up, and I know this hole's going to line up, that this hole's going to line up, and that hole's going to line up. If not, I would be rotating it looking for the proper index. So the only thing this line does is it tells me when all those holes are lined up in the perfect place. So then we're going to make sure that we have our small, the 3/32 drill bit in place. I'm going to hold this down. I'm going to make sure nobody's around me, and I'm going to put the point right next to where I want to drill. I have my hand away from there. I'm going to start the drill slow, and then I'm just going to lightly push. You can see how lightly I'm pushing because it's not wanting to go through there. Okay, so that's 1. The second one. So by holding the tip of the nose cone, I have my hand out of the way. Okay, so what we just did was called a pilot hole. Is we drill a small hole first and then we drill a bigger hole. We may use a series of 6 or 7 different drill bits getting bigger in size to drill a piece of metal or carbon fiber or something. So that first hole is just a pilot hole. We're going to take this bit out, and we're going to put the 5/32 drill bit on. And then we're going to enlarge these holes. And come back, exact same holes. In and out a little bit just to clean it out. Just to clean it out. And we're done. We're going to take the drill bit out and lay everything down so it doesn't get knocked over. Keep our drill bits together. And now we can take the tape off. So going back to the lines we drew, that you can, hopefully you can see it right here. It looks like a T because I drew a line at the bottom and then drew two lines. So that when I go to put this thing back together, and it's like, well, what holes line up with what holes? I see one alignment mark right there, and then I just spin this until I see the other one, and I make sure that those are nice, long, and straight. I'm going to get my screws out of the bag. We're going to take all the stuff out of the bag. And this is part bag number 5. So the screws, again, are blind nuts. It's like a nut with threads and a washer combined. We're going to unscrew the blind nut and make sure that this is going to go in. Goes in that one, it goes in that one, and it goes in that one. Okay? So now we can set this aside, and what we're going to do is we're going to glue the blind nut inside the coupling. So we're going to take our screw, push it through the hole, and I'll take pictures of this and put it right in the video. We're going to do all 3 of these. And so I have the large washer part of the blind nut right up against the tube. Here's the washer, and here's the threaded part this way. It's going to go so that the washer is inside and right against the tube. We're going to do all 3 of these the same way. I'm holding it by the threaded part, putting it inside. We're going to use our flat blade screwdriver, and we're just going to snug them up. Just a little bit. Not very tight at all. So what you should have is now your coupling tube with 3 screw heads on the outside, the flat washer part of the blind nut against the tube, and the threads extending towards the center. What we're going to do is we're going to mix up some JB weld, and we're going to glue those in place. And what's a critical point here is that you do not get any glue on the threaded part, that we're going to keep it all on the blind nut. We're just trying to glue the blind nut to the inside of the coupler tube. Okay. And right against the tube. We're going to do all 3 of these the same way. I'm holding it by the threaded part, putting it inside. We're going to use our flat blade screwdriver, and we're just going to snug them up. Just a little bit. Not very tight at all. So what you should have is now your coupling tube with 3 screw heads on the outside, the flat washer part of the blind nut against the tube, and the threads extending towards the center. What we're going to do is we're going to mix up some JB weld, and we're going to glue those in place. And what's a critical point here is that you do not get any glue on the threaded part, that we're going to keep it all on the blind nut. We're just trying to glue the blind nut to the inside of the coupler tube. Okay, so how much are we going to need here? Let's do like an index finger. We'll call that 1/2 inch. Start with the black. It looks like I have more white than black, so we'll go back and put another touch of black on here. Mix them together. It's all mixed up really good. And again, we do not want any epoxy on the thread sticking through in there. We want it all on the washer part of the blind nut. So we have about a 1/2 pea size. And what this is doing, it's going to leave those nuts on the inside of the rocket so that I can take it apart and put it together without much hassle. And if you can't get to the back side of it very well, that's fine. I'm just kind of doing the sides and the top. And again, I'll take pictures and have them in the video before you get to the gluing part. These screws, the ones we're using here and the ones that we have in the bottom of the rocket, are called machine screws. And their size is size 6, and there's 32 threads per inch, and so they're referred to as a 632 machine screw. So if you happen to lose one or some of these, then you can go to local hardware store or Ace Hardware and pick up 632 machine screw, and these happen to be 3/4 of an inch long. Okay, so I have 3 sides, and it's not much glue at all, just enough to hold that in place. And we have those glued in place. So the next thing I'm going to do is I need to make an attachment point to hold the parachute and the shock cord to this. And so also in bag number 5 is a piece of the Kevlar webbing. It's already tied up, and a piece of orange wire. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the wire and we're going to slide the Kevlar loop on there. We're going to put the ends together and put a couple of twists in there, because what we're going to do is we're going to push this through the bottom and pull that out the top. But before I do that, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of the JB weld where the knot starts. And what that's going to do, it's going to seal the payload bay, because we have the hot gases that come in the rocket to make the parachute come out, but we don't want those hot gases to get up into the payload bay. Okay. Wire pushed through the Kevlar loop, twist it up here, JB weld just at the beginning of the knot, poke the wires through the hole from the bottom, and we're going to pull this straight up. We can take the wire off at that point. And then we can grab this a little bit and twist it, and all we're doing is smearing that epoxy there. Okay? So one other thing that we can do at this point is, I was talking to you in other videos about thrust or stress and stuff. The stress on this coupler and the bulkhead right here is going to be this way. When we put this ring on, we left a little bit of a lip right here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to mix up a little bit more JB weld, and we're just going to put some more JB weld on the top of this to strengthen up the stress direction on this. We're going to do about what we just did. Mix this up. So hopefully in between doing this and gluing the fins and stuff onto your rocket, you've been attaching all three fins, one fin at a time, so that the next point that we're going to do is we're going to go back and contour or fillet the fins to the body tube. And this is the last thing that we need to do this video on this segment here. There's one more hole that we're going to do in a little bit. So all I'm going to do is going to put just a little bit around this edge. Tad more. Set that aside. We want to make sure that we don't have any glue on the body tube. So what we're going to do is take one of the paper towels and we're going to wipe this straight up. Get a clean, sorry about that. Before we set this down, I happen to have a little bit of a drip going, so all I'm going to do is smear this around a little bit. A drip to me means I have too much glue that I'm trying to do something with. So I'm pulling some of that out. We're going to take our bag in case that does drip down. We don't want to glue that to the table. Okay. Okay. One of the critical things is that when we were sanding the nose cone and we were putting some big deep grooves in there, and I was telling you how much super glue to put in there, that it's really hard to glue plastic. And so just in case you didn't get it sanded well enough or enough super glue on there, what we're going to do is we're going to put a little tiny screw in this nose cone. So what we're going to do, again, let's come down 1 finger width and mark a line. And that's where we're going to drill. We want to drill the nose cone and the cardboard together. If I come too far down here, then I'm going to be just drilling through the cardboard. And so the plastic of the nose cone ends right about here somewhere. So if I just do a finger width from this intersection of the nose cone and the body tube, that's going to get me down to plastic still. So we're going to use the little drill bit, the 3/32. We're going to grab the tip of the nose cone. We're going to find that line that we put on there. And we're going to drill through the cardboard and the plastic. We have this little tiny wood or sheet metal screw, which happens to be Phillips. I'm going to get it started, find my Phillips screwdriver, and we're going to put this in and just snug it down. So now what happens, if I didn't get that joint between the body tube and the nose cone done very well, this screw is going to act as a safety, that it's going to literally have to tear the cardboard tube the whole time. And it just gives me a sense of well-being that there's a screw in there in case this wants to pop off, that you didn't get it glued or sanded well enough. So that's why we put that screw in there, just to make us feel good. After all, the payload is the thing that we're trying to work with, and what we don't want to have happen is you put it in a rocket that I helped you guys build, and then have the nose cone pop off or something and have your payload coming in from 800 feet and hitting the ground. Okay, it's been a few hours, so the epoxy is all set up. And the first thing we're going to do is make sure we don't have a little lip from the epoxy on here. If we do, we can take our sandpaper and sand this, because this part's going to go inside the rocket, and just need to make sure we clean that up. The next step is we're going to take the screws out, and they're going to come right out as long as we didn't get any epoxy on the threads. That one's good. This one's good. Move that out of the way. And that one's good. I took some pictures. I'll put them in just before you start gluing to see the right way it's supposed to look and the wrong way it's supposed to look. So that's all done. The blind nuts are in there. They're not going anywhere. We're going to take our piece of foam. We're going to work it down past the blind nuts that we put in there. We can use the payload rail to poke that down in there. Matter of fact, we can leave that in there. We're going to take our nose cone. We're going to put this two parts together, and remember how we're going to line it up. We're going to take this mark that we made. We're going to look for the other mark on the body tube. We're going to line those up. And we're going to put the 3 screws back in. I'm just going to do it for hand tight right now. If I have to, I could take a piece of little sandpaper and knock the tops off these screws. You don't want to go too deep. Just clean up the fuzzy part from there. One thing that you need to think about is if your payload needs to sense the outside air, then we need to drill some more holes in here. And where you drill them doesn't really matter. We can drill it right now. We'll just go between the two lines somewhere, and we're going to put 2 holes in there. And the reason we didn't do this earlier when we were drilling, because it would just have been a bunch more holes that we were trying to figure out which ones needed line nuts glued to them and which ones weren't. So that's why we waited till now to put the vent holes, they're called vent holes, in our payload bay. So then we just take the screwdriver and snug those up, and that's the payload bay. We have the shot cord on the end. We've added some extra JB weld here to make it structurally against the way that it's going to be pulling, and that's ready to accept our payloads. And that's about it for that part. The next segment we're going to go on to the fin can, or the fins themselves, and we'll be putting JB weld along the side. So we'll clean up here and garbage, and then we'll move on.